Please be seated. The court is now back in session, and we would like once again to give the floor to the prosecution to put further questions to this witness. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Welcome back, Mr. Sum. When we finished speaking, you stated that you got on the 7th or 8th truck that you requested to get on, but they refused you and they pushed you off. Said, told you to get on the next car, and I didn't care which truck I got on, but every one I tried, they were all full. Did you wait for the next trip, or did you go somewhere else?
I kept waiting and waiting until the last car of the convoy, but I couldn't get on.
And after the last truck went past and you couldn't get on, what did you do? Where did you go?
Then I returned to my native village to meet with my family.
Now, in your statement, you say that they asked you to wait for the next trip, bearing in mind that you said you and the other soldiers were eager to go to Tulpo Tre to meet Angkor, but why did you not wait for the second trip like you were asked?
There was no second trip actually. They spoke about the second trip, but it did not realize. We kept waiting anyway, but it did not happen.
I know it can be difficult with numbers sometimes, but about how many people from that 500 were you waiting with that didn't get on the first convoy?
I can recall that there were not many. Through my estimation, there were between 50 and 60 people.
You said that the provincial hall was guarded by about, I think, 50 or 60 Khmer Rouge soldiers. Did they stay at the provincial hall with the group, this group that couldn't get on the convoy, or did they go with the convoy?
Through my observation, each vehicle was in charge by a Khmer Rouge. So they would control the people on each truck.
The group that was left waiting at the provincial hall, did you have any guards?
The one who missed the trip did not have any guards on them.
How long did you wait before you decided to go home?
I waited for about 2 hours, but there was no vehicle coming back. Because by that time they should have returned, as their location was not that far from my village.
When you left the provincial hall, were the other 50 or 60 that were with you, did they stay at the provincial hall, or did they go earlier? Did they leave the hall earlier?
I left and others people also left.
And just to be clear, did you all leave at the same time or at a different time?
We all left at about the same time as we went to our respective house.
In your statement, you said to the ECC investigators at English 0024 2126, Khmer 0019 6812, and French 0027 4132, you state, 3 days later, I knew that the Khmer Rouge took them to kill them at that Tulpotre. I knew that from two of the soldiers named Fat and Dor, who fled the killing and sneaked to live in a village. 2 weeks later, the two former soldiers were chased and arrested by the Khmer Rouge soldiers for execution. Between the time that you left the provincial hall, as those trucks didn't come back, and the time that you found out from Fat and Dor that these people were killed at Tulpotre, what did you think had happened to them, if anything?
President, witness, please wait. Counsel Victor Coupe, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Of course, it's allowed to ask a witness what he thought at that specific time. But at the same time, it's also an invitation to speculate, because it's not about his own emotions, it's about what he thought might have happened. So it's a very thin line here about asking a question about the thoughts of the witness and inviting him to speculate. So I would like to invite you, Mr. President, to instruct the witness to limit his answers to the things that he was thinking at that time, but not to speculate as to what he thought could have happened.
Mr. President, I can just clarify. It's easier. Did you know what had happened to those people on the trucks before you were told by Fat and Dor that they were killed at Tulpotre?
After I heard of that news, I could not think of anything else. I did not even believe it. So, after I heard the news 3 days later, in fact, bulldozers were sent to that area to bury those dead bodies. So I realized that it did happen. And the information that I received was correct, that those people were executed.
Thank you. I just want to go back a little bit. The two soldiers, Fat and Dor, were they Lon Nol soldiers or Khmer Rouge soldiers?
They were the victims, that is, they were the former Lon Nol soldiers who escaped the execution at Tulpu Chirei.
And can you remember specifically what they said to you? Can you explain?
They told me the method of taking those people. In fact, they did not reach Tulpu Chirei yet. They stopped at about 1 kilometer or 700 meters from Tulpu Chirei. They got off the tracks and they were told they would go to meet with Ong Ka. And they were then tied up, that is for the second parameter or the second group of people, and then they were led to the third line, or third group, and then they were killed there. And the two soldiers actually told me to be vigilant as well. And as I stated in my written record of the interview, about 2 weeks later, the two soldiers disappeared.
Just so that we're clear, did the soldiers tell you that they saw the killings or not?
The two soldiers were the victims who fled from the killing site, and they witnessed the killing. For that reason, they could not be allowed to leave, and they were arrested and killed 15 days later.
Did you know Fat and Dor before they told you about the killings at Tulpu Chirei? Did you know who they were beforehand?
I knew them since childhood.
You said that about 2 weeks later they were chased and arrested by the Khmer Rouge for execution in your statement. How do you know that?
I knew about that because the villagers spoke about it from one to another. They said that the two people were arrested and killed, and from that day I have never met them until today.
In your statement to ECC investigators, you stated something in relation to the numbers of killed at Tulpo Tray. And it's in English 0024 2128, Khmer 0019 6814, and French 0027 4134. The question was put, how many victims were killed by Khmer Rouge soldiers at Tulpo Tray? You answered, I reported to a meeting in Phnom Penh, which I attended, that there were approximately 2,000 victims killed in Tulpo Tray. My estimate, based on accounts given by Seng Chorn, former chief of Svei Long Commune, Kandiang district, he was there during the Khmer Rouge period. It also includes numbers of victims I personally obtained during the Khmer Rouge period when they called the provincial governor, Lon Nol soldiers, students and civil servants to receive Angkor at Tulpo Tray. Just so we're clear, this figure of 2,000 victims was given to you by Mr. Chorn in 1980 or sometime before that. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Your Honour, I won't question the witness any further about that figure other than to say document D125/49 should assist your deliberations on that issue. Mr. Sum, to conclude in relation to Tulpo Tray, you've stated that you saw about 13 or 15 white trucks leave in a convoy from the provincial town hall, and you believe that about 50 to 60 people were on those trucks. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Is it also your evidence that you don't believe there was a second convoy that left the provincial town hall? There was only one on that day. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And is it your evidence that there were about 50 or 60 people with you that missed the first convoy of the 500 people that attended that second meeting? Is that correct?
Yes.
You mentioned that there were a number of people that you knew at that meeting on that day. You stated that you knew a lot of them. I said, of the 200, about how many did you know, closely or as an acquaintance? And you said, I still recall the senior officers, soldiers, including the generals and other second-ranking officials from the general ranks, and I knew fairly a lot of them, at least 10 to 20 of them. Those people that you knew, those 10 or 20 that you knew, did they come from Pasat province?
Yes, They came from Busan. In fact, they worked in Busan province.
Have you ever seen them or heard of them from someone else as being alive till this day?
Up to the present time, I have not heard anything from them.
Thank you. Your Honour, I would ask that a photograph from document D125/217 be placed on the screen. I won't mention the photograph, but I'll ask the witness, if you permit me, to see whether he recognises the photograph that has been blown up from that document. The document, the ERN number of the page on which this photograph comes from is E0029 English 4316, Khmer 00377 214, and French 0037 7323. If I can ask that be placed on the screen for the witness to look at. Witness, do you see the photograph on the screen?
Witness, yes.
Do you recognise that building?
Previously, it was the Grand Hotel in the provincial town. The provincial governor actually worked and stayed in that Grand Hotel.
Is this building the provincial hall where that meeting was held or not?
No, it was not held at this location. This building was for the reception of the governor, or you can say it is the governor's residence. The meeting was held at the provincial administrative office.
And where is that in relation to this building?
Here we enter from the main road. The meeting building was on the left-hand side of the Grand Hotel.
And about how many metres or kilometres from the Grand Hotel?
It was about 30 meters.
And thank you, Your Honours, that I don't need that photograph on the screen anymore. But
sorry to interrupt, just a clarification. Mr. Prosecutor, have you just shown the photos on ERN number 00294315 and 316? Because I didn't get the numbers.
It's 00294316.
16.
And witness the meeting hall that you went to on that day, you said earlier that is still standing to this day. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And the provincial meeting hall that's still standing, has it been renovated? Has it been improved and built upon since that time period in 1975?
The building remains the same, but the roof had been repaired. It was in a similar condition to the Grand Hotel.
And does the building look similar to the Grand Hotel?
The Grand Hotel has 2 stories, but the other building, the administrative building, only has 1 floor.
And just to be clear, the administrative building that you met at, the Provincial Hall, did that have a fence around it in 1975?
Yes, it did have a fence surrounding it.
And the trucks that you referred to that took the people to Tulpo Tray, were those trucks inside the fence or outside the fence on the road?
The trucks were parked along the road outside the fence. It was parked on the road itself.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have no further questions.
President, thank you. The floor is now given to the lead co-lawyers for civil parties to question this witness. You may proceed. Mr. President, your orders. The assigned lawyer is Chiet Wan Lee, and Counsel Sinofort may supplement the questions. Thank you. President, you may proceed. Chiet Wan Lee. Good morning, Mr. President, Your Honors, and good morning everyone in and around the courtroom. My name is Chiet Wan Lee, lawyer for civil parties, and good morning, Mr. Witness. Yesterday and throughout this morning session, you shed light on certain points before this court in order to find the truth in this case. I'd like you to clarify on certain points. They are related to the events occurred within Busan province. Question: on what day was Busan province liberated? Answer: could you please clarify your reference to liberation? Are you referring to the events that took place in 1975? Question: I'd like you to clarify when Busan province was under the control of the Khmer Rouge? Answer: the Khmer Rouge took control of Busan province on the 17th April 1975. Question: so it was liberated on the same day as Phnom Penh? Answer: it was at the same time. Question. Another point which I am still unclear, even though you responded to the prosecution that when the Democratic Cambodia forces controlled Posat province, they gathered up the loyal soldiers, civil servants, and students for a meeting at the provincial town hall. Can you clarify how many times were the meetings held? Answer. I cannot recall the number of times the meetings were held. But for me, after I returned from Swaidonka battlefield, I participated in a meeting, and I knew that there had been meetings before that. And I did not know the details of the meetings between the two sides. And because of those meetings, our side trusted the other side, and for that reason, they could gather up hundreds of us. Thank you. Question. Can you recall what day the last meeting was held when the soldiers and public servants were taken to Tulputri? Was it straight away after the day of the liberation? Answer. It was not straight away. It was about 2 weeks after. I think I already mentioned that in my PV. I cannot recall the exact date, but you may refer to my PV. But from my recollection, it was not straight away after the 17th April. It was about 1 week or 2 weeks after. Question. You were a soldier in Posat province, and you were also a native of Posat person. Can you recall who were the military commanders that got onto the tracks with Promli Hun? Answer. I can recall some names. Not only some, but several. Question. Please describe those names. The commanders, the senior commanders, I mean. Answer. To my knowledge, the senior military commanders, namely the one who was in charge of the politics, who were a lieutenant colonel, Mr. Liang Chum, who was a lieutenant colonel or the colonel, and who was in charge of the guards in the provincial town, and another captain, and my relative, who was a captain as well. In particular, those who were in charge of the offices at the staff office, Mr. Chen Ta, and it could be Mai Si Chun, the younger brother of Mai Si Chon, who made the announcement on the radio. He was in charge of an office in Posat as well. So mostly the main chiefs or heads of offices went. And yes, I heard about those people, and I knew those people who went. Mostly they were the senior military commanders, or at least they were in charge of offices within the province. Question. Do you know Mr. Pal and Mr. Run? Answer. I heard of the name Pal. He could be a major lieutenant. Question. After the operation at the Tulpu Chre, did you know what happened to Pearl and Run? Answer. I have not met them, so I did not know what happened to them. Question. In your written record of interview with OCIJ, there is document D125/48 on the Khmer EN 00196810, English 00242125, and in French 00274130. You state that there was an event of purging. Could you elaborate further on this point? Answer. The event of purging was done at cooperatives and villages and at various sections, including the kitchen. In fact, it was kind of a screening of those people who had connection or tendency. At that time, it was a kind of a differentiation between the best people and the new people, or the 17 April people. So those who had the tendency with the Lunal government were subsequently purged after the event at Tulpu Chre. I myself was considered to have a tendency and subject to purging.
Counsel, thank you very much. I would like you to help clarify the term smash and purge. Are they different terms? The President, Mr. Witness, could you please hold on and counsel Kope, you may now proceed.
Mr. President, I object to this question. The witness is now being invited to give an explanation about the alleged terminology of the CPK and its members. The witness is a former Lon Nol soldier, so what the meaning smash, purge, or whatever could have had is, from the perspective of this particular witness, speculation. So I object to this question.
Counsel, Mr. President, please allow me to respond. This witness was a former soldier in the Lon Nol regime. However, after 1975, he lived and worked under the Khmer Rouge regime. To that effect, he should have known something about the smash and purge plans, which were part of the policy of the CPK. The President, these terms have not been mentioned by the witness, or we do not know whether the witness is aware of such terms. So the question has been initiated by you, and that you put these terms to the witness to verify. So the chamber notes that such line of questioning is not appropriate. counsel for the civil parties. May I proceed then, Mr. President? Mr. Witness, in your statement you made before the co-investigating judges, I have a question regarding the statement. What did you see during the Democratic Cambodia regime from 1975 all the way to 1979? Response: I'm afraid I don't understand your question. Counsel: Mr. Witness, tell the chamber what you heard, what you knew that had happened in the Democratic Cambodia during the entire period. I may add, did you know any of the security centers in the Northwest Zone? The President: Counsel, you are now advised to direct your questions to matters that are relevant to the scope of the current trial proceedings. In particular, the scope relevant to the facts and the law, and also the time frame regarding this particular segment of the trial. We are now focusing on the first and the second phases of the evacuation. Now you appear to be asking questions covering the entire area or period of the Democratic Cambodia. So with that, please be reminded that it is not appropriate and that time would be wasted for such a line of questioning if you continue to do so. Counsel: Mr. Witness, how many times did you attend study sessions or meetings, and who would be the persons who chaired those sessions? Response: After the event, before people could be sent to Tuolpochrey, there was an education session convened at the sector office in Con Ding. Students, teachers were invited to attend this 3-day session. And Mr. Sot, who was the sector secretary, was chairing this 3-day educational studies session. Question: did you engage in the daily meetings that could be conducted in your area? Response: it was a routine for the Khmer Rouge to conduct a meeting on a regular basis. And when I joined this mobile brigade, I had to also avail myself to attend such meeting that was carried out every night. Question: what was the content of such meeting or each meeting? Response: the main topic of the meeting was about self-criticism, and people would have to raise matters concerning what they had done and what they had not done. So this is a criticism and self-criticism sessions, as they called them. Question: apart from these meetings you mentioned, did you also attend other meetings? For example, the meetings that relevant to the section when you said about political indoctrination. Response: I attended only one session when political stance and indoctrination was lectured by Mr. Sot. That's the only one occasion when I engaged in political study session. Question: can you also elaborate on the term you mentioned about political indoctrination? Response: so far as I understood, by the time I attended that session, I believed that this was part of the session to discuss on revolution. So who would be on the Lon Nol and who would be on the Khmer Rouge soldiers? And theory was placed in the session, and that these two fragments, the factions, could not be merged together because one believed in the liberal part of the view and the other would be believing in the other less liberal part. So people appeared to have contradictions in the view itself. That's why in the session, we were asked to make sure that we agree on one principle, and which is the revolutionary vision, and that everyone had to follow. We had to rid off our previous belief or standpoint, and that after this political study session, everyone was encouraged to follow the new idea and set of vision, the revolution and the democratic Cambodia version of revolution. Question: I thank you for this clarification. I have a few final questions. In the democratic Cambodia regime, apart from Tasot, did you ever know any other individuals in the area of Posat province who were holding senior positions? Response: apart from Tasot, who was the secretary of the sector, and after he left Posat, his successor was Tatri, and then followed by another person by the name of Tatoi. I only have heard of these two individuals who were the successors of Tasot. But by 1977, I saw their names on the list in Tuoslang prison. Rather, I saw the name of Tatri at Tuoslang prison in 1977. Question: during this democratic Cambodia period, did you ever hear the names of other people, including Pol Pot, Nuon Chea, Ieng Sary, for example? Response: I had heard of them, but I never got to know them in person. Response: did you hear these names during that period? Response: yes, I did, but I never knew them personally. Question: this is going to be my very final question. You are the person who was born in Posat, and also you got married in the Democratic Cambodia. Can you tell the chamber whether such marriage was forced, arranged, or did you get married on your own volition? The President, Mr. Witness, could you please hold on, and Counsel Kope, you may now proceed.
I object, Mr. President. That same question was asked earlier this week. It's far outside the scope of this segment of the trial.
Counsel for the civil parties, Mr. President, I have no further questions, and I thank you, Mr. Witness, for your responses.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, Your Honours. Good morning to everybody, and good morning to you, Mr. Witness. I'm a lawyer for the civil parties, and I'm going to ask you some questions on the subjects at issue in this particular file. After April 1975 and the departure of certain people towards Tuolpo Chray, where yourself did you go?
Response: after this, I joined the mobile brigade, digging canals, building dams.
In the village where you were, or in the surrounding villages, were there people who had been displaced from Pursat or other towns?
Response: immediately after that event, there were no new people yet.
Well, can you tell me when these displaced people, who you call new people, did actually arrive?
Response: I think by 1976 or 1977, people from Phnom Penh were already coming to this area.
How do you know that these people were from Phnom Penh?
Response: I knew this because these people were transported through or by train and trucks, and the arrangement for transporting them was made by the Democratic Cambodia Authority.
Did you see them when they arrived?
Response. Yes, I did, because at every village of Bosat province, each of these villages had to receive a lot of newcomers from Phnom Penh.
Thank you. Can you describe these people to us? Were they families? Did they seem to be healthy? What sort of a state were they in? Could you describe that for us?
The President, witness, could you please hold on and counsel Victor Kope? You may now proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm not saying that these questions are not within the scope of segment 1 of case 002. However, I do note that this witness has been called by the Chamber for very particular reasons, giving evidence in relation to the events at Tu Po Tre. I do note in this respect as well that the prosecutor started yesterday at 3:30, and that we're now already getting about 20 minutes in the time allotted to the defense. I don't have a problem with that if we get a half hour extra as well, but considering the relevance of the questions in respect to the specific reason why this witness has been called back and the time issue, I think these questions should not be allowed at this stage.
Mr. President, I'll answer if I may. You said just now that this witness should answer questions not only on Tu Po Tre, but also on forced transfer, insofar as he is able to provide us with some elements. We have the record of the interviews, and it's useful to ask a few questions. I have less than 10 minutes worth of your time to take up, and I'd like to continue my questions, which appear to me to be entirely within the proper scope.
Response. You may proceed, indeed, counsel.
Thank you. So, Mr. Witness, let me ask you my question once again, because it might have slipped your mind. You said that you saw these people coming in from Phnom Penh on trucks and in trains, and that they were dispersed around the various villages. Can you describe these people, the families, their age, and the kind of state they were in?
Response. What I saw, what I knew based on my experience living in the villages. You may know already that it is not easy when people had to be displaced, because people had to move from one area to another, to the area that they never got used to living in. So they had to be exposed to the rice paddies, and they got sick, and some families just perished entirely. For example, in my cooperatives, the whole family died.
Je vous remercie, monsieur.
Thank you. Were there food problems that you were aware of?
Response. Food was not adequate. I myself did not have enough to eat, let alone these newcomers.
Est-ce que des gens...
Did people die of starvation?
Response. Yes, they died of starvation and some disease.
Thank you. Earlier on, you said that the Khmer Rouge taught people to relinquish their old ideas and to take up the ideas of the Khmer Rouge. Do you know what happened to people who didn't want to change their ideas?
Response. I cannot talk on behalf of them. Some could relinquish their previous stance. Some could not do so to take up new idea. These people end up being locked behind bar or detained.
Where were they detained? Were there special places to detain them in?
Response. So far as I know, there were plenty of places where people were detained. I already made it clear in my statement regarding the security centers where people had been detained.
Thank you. Just to be quite clear, you're referring to what you said to the investigators from the OCIJ in the record of that?
Response. Yes, it is correct. I already made it clear in that statement about the security centers.
At the time, were you afraid?
Response. Yes, I was not only afraid, but to me, I was a dead person already.
Finally, sir, this is my last question. You talked about what you saw with your own eyes, and yesterday you also explained that you gathered evidence in 1979 and you brought that evidence to Phnom Penh in 1980. Can you tell us if the people who spoke with you referred to things that were identical to what you yourself had seen?
Response. As in my statement, I talked about the event that happened in 1979 and 1980 when I went to Rumlich village. Rumlich is believed to be a place where a lot of people died, and it happened because the chaotic situation happened when these people were caught between the two main forces, the Khmer Rouge and the other side, and people were fired at and they died, and I could see the remains of these people, and they built a stupa or a memorial site to commemorate the death of these people, and I saw this with my own eyes. And Mr. Duong Sot, who was the local person in that place, talked in detail about the recollection of the event, and he is still alive.
Thank you very much, Mr. Witness. I haven't got any more questions for you. I thank you too, Mr. President.
The President, thank you, Counsel, and thank you, Mr. Witness. It is already appropriate moment now for the adjournment. The Chamber will adjourn until 1:30 p.m. Court officer is now directed to assist Mr. Witness and his jury counsel during the adjournment, and have him and his counsel return to the courtroom by 1:30 p.m. Security personnel are now directed to take Mr. Kilsompon to his holding cell downstairs and have him return to the courtroom before the next session resumes at 1:30 p.m. The court is adjourned.